I still remember that fateful autumn night as if it were etched into my very soul. My name is Liam Carter, and I've always prided myself on being a rational man, one who could weather any storm. Yet, nothing prepared me for the crushing revelation that would soon shatter my world. It was a cold, drizzly evening in late October when I pulled into the driveway of our modest suburban home. The rain drummed steadily on the asphalt, and the sky was a dense, unforgiving blanket of gray. I had just wrapped up a long day at work, eager to return to the familiar comforts of home. But as I stepped out of my car, a chill beyond the autumn air raced down my spine. Across the street, parked with almost deliberate precision, was a sleek, matte black SUV. Its polished exterior glistened under the streetlights, a stark anomaly among the unassuming houses lining the block. I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that this vehicle was out of place, a silent harbinger of secrets I was not meant to uncover. For months, I had sensed a growing distance between my wife, Amanda Monroe, and me. The warmth in her eyes had faded, replaced by a guarded coolness that left me feeling isolated and bewildered. I had always trusted her implicitly, dismissing my creeping doubts as nothing more than the stress of everyday life. But that night, the presence of that black SUV stirred a nagging certainty, a whisper in my mind that something was terribly wrong. Unbeknownst to me, a small security camera had been discreetly installed in our driveway weeks earlier, a simple precaution to add an extra layer of safety to our lives. I never imagined its unblinking lens would one day capture the evidence of the betrayal that was about to unravel my world. As I retreated into our darkened living room, the sound of the SUV's engine idling in the distance etched itself permanently into my memory. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake in our bedroom, listening to the relentless patter of rain against the window, my thoughts swirling with every subtle sign I had ignored. The image of that matte black SUV seared itself into my mind. Finally, as dawn crept over the horizon, I made the decision that would irreversibly alter my life. I retrieved the footage from the security camera. Sitting alone in the dim light of our living room, I played the video on my laptop, my heart sinking with every passing second. There, unmistakably, was Amanda, radiant in a form-fitting black dress that accentuated her graceful figure. Her auburn hair, normally a source of pride and beauty, glowed under the streetlights. But what pierced me to the core was not her beauty. It was the undeniable intimacy between her and a man I'd never seen before. Standing by her side was a rugged, confident stranger whose casual smile sent a shockwave through my soul. Every frame of that footage was a blow. I watched, frozen in disbelief, as Amanda laughed and embraced the stranger. Their closeness, the tender touches and lingering glances, confirmed the betrayal I had long feared. I replayed the video over and over, each viewing deepening the sting of her infidelity. My mind raced with questions. Who was this man? How long had Amanda been living a double life? And most agonizingly, why? The reality was unbearable. The once solid foundation of our marriage began to crumble under the weight of the evidence. In the days that followed, I wandered through our home like a ghost. Every room, every corner filled with memories of a happier time, now stood as a painful reminder of the life I thought I knew. I scrutinized every detail of Amanda's behavior, the secretive phone calls, the late nights away from home, the furtive glances when I entered a room. All the pieces of the puzzle pointed to one devastating truth. My wife had been betraying me, and the black SUV had become the symbol of that treachery. I turned to my closest friend, Hunter Reeves, for solace. Over coffee at a quiet local diner, he looked at me with concern. "Liam, I'm so sorry," he said quietly, his eyes filled with sympathy. "You deserve to know the truth, but I can't imagine how hard this must be." His words, though kind, did little to ease the raw agony that churned inside me. I spent sleepless nights poring over every shred of evidence. Text messages, emails, and even subtle hints from Amanda's social media posts that hinted at a hidden life. The stranger in the SUV would later be identified as Travis Knight, a name that, in that moment, became synonymous with betrayal and heartbreak. With every new discovery, the wound deepened, and my world felt increasingly alien and unrecognizable as the evidence mounted. The inevitable confrontation with Amanda loomed over me like a dark storm cloud. I rehearsed my words endlessly, my mind torn between burning anger and the desperate need for answers. How could the woman I had loved and trusted so completely transform into someone capable of such deception? My thoughts were a tangled mess of confusion and pain, a stark contrast to the steady reality now staring me in the face. That night, as another storm raged outside, I knew the time had come. I set up my laptop in the living room, the damning footage queued and ready. When the front door finally creaked open and Amanda stepped inside, her face shifted instantly from the expected warmth to one of shock and dread as she saw the evidence laid bare. "Amanda," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and heartbreak, "I saw everything." The words were barely audible, yet they carried the full weight of my despair. "The SUV, the footage, I know about you and Travis." For a long, agonizing moment, the room fell silent. Only the sound of the storm outside punctuating the heavy silence. Amanda's face, usually so expressive and kind, was now a mask of guilt and sorrow. In that suspended moment, I knew that nothing could restore the innocence we once shared. I left that night shattered and alone, my heart heavy with the unbearable truth. I understood that this was only the beginning of a long, painful journey. A journey that would force me to confront not only the depths of my own despair, but also the eventual path toward a physical reckoning. Deep within me, a dark seed of retribution had been planted, one that promised a final, tangible act of vengeance when the time was right. Now, as I recount every detail of that night and the agonizing days that followed, I realize that the road ahead is fraught with uncertainty. Yet, I also know one thing for certain. I will not let this betrayal define me. I will rise, stronger and more resolute than before, and when the moment comes, I will ensure that justice is served in the most physical, undeniable way possible. In the weeks that followed that fateful confrontation, my world descended into a gray blur of sleepless nights and restless days. The image of Amanda, her tear-streaked face, her trembling voice, and the damning evidence of her betrayal haunted every moment of my existence. I found myself drifting through our once familiar home as if I were a stranger, every corner echoing with memories of a happier past that now felt painfully distant. The shock of that stormy night had left a deep scar within me, a wound that festered with each passing day. My mind became a battlefield, where anger and sorrow clashed relentlessly. I spent countless hours re-watching the footage, each replay intensifying the sting of betrayal. Travis Knight, the man in the SUV, became the face of my torment. I had learned his name, and with it, a slew of information that painted him not as a shadowy villain, but as a man with his own flaws and demons. Yet, that knowledge did little to ease my pain. That I sought solace in isolation, shutting myself away from friends and the outside world. However, even in solitude, the questions gnawed at me. How had Amanda allowed herself to slip so far away? What had driven her to seek solace in someone else's arms? Every whispered phone call and every secretive glance over her shoulder was now a painful reminder of the life we once shared, and that she had abandoned it for a fleeting thrill. Determined to uncover the full extent of her deception, I began to piece together the puzzle of her double life. Late at night, I combed through old text messages and emails, finding hints of meetings, cryptic appointments, and plans that never made sense. I discovered fragments of conversations with Travis that hinted at clandestine rendezvous in dimly lit parking garages and upscale bars. Each revelation sent another shockwave through me, further eroding the foundation of trust one had once taken for granted. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, my closest friend, Hunter Reeves, stepped in with quiet persistence. "Liam, I know you're hurting," he said one evening as we sat in a quiet booth at our favorite diner. "But you can't let this consume you. You deserve answers and you deserve to move on." His words, though sincere, only deepened my internal conflict. I wanted nothing more than to seek justice, a justice that would leave no doubt about the cost of betrayal. Deep inside, a dark determination was slowly taking root, one that promised not just emotional reckoning, but a physical confrontation that would force Amanda to face the consequences of her actions. I also turned to Maverick Cole, a rugged entrepreneur with a penchant for straight talk. Maverick listened intently as I recounted every painful detail. "Liam," he said with a low, steady voice, "sometimes, the only way to heal is to confront the pain head-on. If you need to take matters into your own hands, make sure you know what you're doing. Don't let your anger blind you to what's right." His words resonated with me, stoking the embers of retribution while reminding me that I must tread carefully. I was caught in a tumultuous crossfire between justice and revenge, and every new piece of evidence only fanned the flames of my resolve. During this time, I began discreetly gathering physical proof of Amanda's continued infidelities. I installed additional cameras around the house and even followed her on a few occasions, careful to remain unseen. It was during one of these ventures that I witnessed a familiar sight. Amanda, dressed elegantly in a black outfit, stepping into a sleek car with Travis waiting just outside a chic restaurant. The scene unfolded with a surreal clarity. The same intimate gestures, the soft laughter, and the unmistakable closeness that had shattered my trust. I recorded the encounter on my phone, each moment a bitter reminder of the life that had slipped away. The mounting evidence confirmed what I had feared all along. Amanda had not only been unfaithful, but she had done so repeatedly, weaving a web of lies that spanned months. I spent long, agonizing hours reviewing every detail, feeling the full weight of betrayal settle into the depths of my being. The realization that she had betrayed me not just once, but over and over again, left me numb with a combination of despair and burning fury. That fury gradually morphed into a dangerous resolve. I began to plan not just for emotional healing, but for the moment when I would exact a physical reckoning. Every fiber of my being screamed for retribution, for a way to confront Amanda in a manner that would force her to experience even a fraction of the pain she had inflicted upon me. I envisioned a final confrontation, one where words would no longer suffice, and where actions would speak louder than all the doubts and betrayals of the past. I immersed myself in research, reading accounts of similar betrayals and the paths others had taken to reclaim their dignity. Late into the nights, I pored over online forums and sought advice from those who had weathered similar storms. Amidst the digital voices, one recurring theme emerged. When the time comes for physical retribution, it must be precise, measured, and ultimately, an act of reclaiming one's own power rather than an unrestrained burst of violence. I wasn't interested in a mindless outburst. I wanted a calculated, definitive act that would mark the end of Amanda's deception and the beginning of my redemption. In those solitary hours, I found that my inner thoughts turned darker, and a plan began to take shape in my mind. I would wait until the moment was right, a time when I could confront Amanda face to face, not just with words but with a physical demonstration of my pain and fury. I imagined the confrontation. A stormy night mirroring the night I first discovered the betrayal, with emotions boiling over and actions set in motion that could never be taken back. Yet, even as I planned my eventual retribution, I was forced to confront the lingering question. Would such an act truly bring me closure, or would it only deepen the cycle of violence and regret? I wrestled with this dilemma in the quiet moments, staring out at the rain-soaked streets, each droplet a reminder of the tears I had shed. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about seeking revenge. It was about reclaiming control over a life that had been hijacked by deceit. I needed to make sure that Amanda understood, in no uncertain terms, that her actions had consequences that reached far beyond a shattered marriage. By the end of these harrowing weeks, my determination had solidified into an unyielding resolve. I had documented every instance of betrayal, every secret meeting, every tender moment shared between Amanda and Travis. The evidence was irrefutable, and it fueled a darkness inside me that promised a physical reckoning. A final act that would force Amanda to confront the pain she had inflicted on me. As I closed my laptop one sleepless night, the storm outside intensifying into a violent downpour, I knew that the time was coming when the shadows of betrayal would no longer hide behind whispered secrets and furtive glances. Soon, I would step out of the darkness, armed with proof and fueled by a desire for retribution. And when that moment arrived, nothing would stop me from making Amanda pay for the life she had stolen from me. The tension that had been building for weeks finally reached its breaking point on a night as dark and stormy as the one when I first discovered Amanda's betrayal. I had spent endless hours meticulously planning my next move, weighing the consequences of a final confrontation that would force Amanda to pay for the pain she'd inflicted. Now, with the evidence of her deception irrefutably documented and my resolve hardened like forged steel, I knew that the moment of reckoning was inevitable. That night, the sky was a tumultuous canvas of roiling clouds and lashing rain. The storm outside echoed the chaos within me as I drove to the secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place I had chosen deliberately for its isolation, where no one would witness the inevitable clash. My heart pounded in my chest, and every mile I put between myself and the remnants of my old life intensified the raw determination surging through me. I parked my car a short distance from the warehouse and stepped out into the storm. The wind whipped at my face, cold and relentless, yet it did little to cool the fury burning inside me. I had learned that Amanda was scheduled to meet Travis at this location, an abandoned industrial complex that had served as their clandestine rendezvous point. It was here, amid the peeling paint and echoing silence, that I intended to confront her once and for all. That I moved cautiously, every step measured and deliberate. The rain blurred my vision, and the dim glow of a single, flickering street lamp cast long, distorted shadows on the pavement. My pulse thrummed in my ears as I approached the designated meeting area. I could see a single car parked near a set of rusted loading docks, a matte black vehicle that I recognized all too well. It was clear. Amanda and Travis were already here. I waited in the shadows until I heard the faint murmur of voices. Soon, Amanda emerged from the car, her silhouette outlined against the interior light. Her posture was elegant yet betraying a hint of urgency, as if she knew that the night's secret meeting might soon unravel. Travis stood beside her, speaking in low tones, unaware of the storm. Not just outside but the one that was about to engulf them. The moment felt suspended in time. All the pain of the past weeks, the endless nights of torment and doubt, surged into a single point of decision. I stepped forward from the darkness, my presence announced by the sound of my steady, determined footsteps. Amanda and Travis startled, their conversation ceasing as they turned to face me. "Amanda," I said, my voice low and laced with a mix of sorrow and simmering anger. "I've been waiting for this moment." There was no pleasantry left in my tone, only the raw truth of betrayal and the promise of retribution. For a few long, excruciating seconds, Amanda's eyes widened in shock and regret. I could see the fear there, the realization that the carefully constructed web of lies was now unraveling. "Liam," she began, but I cut her off, my voice rising with the intensity of my resolve. "You betrayed everything we once had," I spat, stepping closer. "You've torn apart our life, our love, and all I ever believed in. And now, it's time for you to face the consequences." Travis, his face a mixture of apprehension and defiance, moved protectively in front of Amanda. "You don't know what you're saying," he warned, his voice trembling slightly. "This isn't the way." But I was beyond reason. The storm seemed to mirror the tempest within me, and in that charged moment, words were no longer enough. I lunged forward, the pain of every unhealed wound fueling the force behind my actions. In a blur of movement, I grabbed Amanda's wrist, forcing her to meet my gaze. Her eyes, once so full of life, now shimmered with tears and regret as she tried to pull away, but I held her firmly. "This is for every lie, every secret, every moment you chose passion over loyalty," I murmured, my voice raw with emotion. In that instant, the dam of pent-up anger burst forth. My hands, steady despite the storm, delivered a series of blows, each strike an expression of the anguish I had carried for far too long. Amanda cried out, the sound mingling with the roar of the rain and the clamor of my fury. I didn't relent immediately. Every punch, every controlled strike, was a catharsis, a release of the agony of betrayal. I wasn't mindlessly violent. Each action was deliberate, a physical manifestation of the heartbreak and the need to reclaim control over a life that had been stolen. As the confrontation reached its peak, Travis attempted to intervene, but my focus was unyielding. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He realized that his presence had only deepened the tragedy of the night. "Liam, stop!" he shouted. But his plea was drowned out by the storm and the tumult of my retribution and the ensuing struggle. Amid the flurry of motion and the overwhelming sound of the storm, I felt an almost surreal detachment. It was as if the physical pain was mingling with the emotional, a reminder that every blow delivered was a step toward reclaiming a fractured identity. I wasn't fighting simply to harm, but to force Amanda, and, in a sense myself, to acknowledge the irreversible damage that had been done. Eventually, as the rain began to ease and the thunder faded into a distant rumble, I stepped back, my breath ragged and my vision blurred with tears. Amanda crumpled to the ground, a broken figure surrounded by the remnants of our shattered past. Travis, speechless and defeated, slowly retreated into the shadows. In that moment, the warehouse, once a secret meeting ground for deceit, became the stage for my final act of vengeance. That I stood there for a long time, the weight of what I had done settling heavily upon me. The physical retribution, though it did not erase the betrayal, was a declaration. A final, undeniable statement that I would no longer be the victim. It was my way of forcing the truth into the light, even if that truth was drenched in blood and regret. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a silence that was both eerie and profound. I knew that nothing could undo the violence of that night, but it was a necessary reckoning. A raw and painful purging of the lies and deceit that had poisoned my life for far too long. As I helped Amanda to her feet, her eyes met mine with a mix of sorrow, defiance, and an unspoken apology. In that fleeting, painful moment, I realized that the journey to healing was far from over. The physical scars would fade with time, but the emotional ones would remain as reminders of the night I chose to confront betrayal head-on. In the end, the night had delivered its brutal lesson. Betrayal, once exposed, demands a reckoning, and sometimes that reckoning is as physical as it is emotional. I left the warehouse that night forever changed. A man who had reclaimed his power at a terrible cost, determined to rebuild a life from the ruins of a love that had turned to ash. This was not the end of my story, but rather the dark turning point that would eventually lead me to find strength, redemption, and, in time, a way to forgive. Not for Amanda's sake, but for my own salvation. Yet the memory of that night, the storm, the confrontation, and the raw, undeniable physical retribution would remain with me always. A stark reminder of what happens when betrayal is left unchallenged. That in the days following that stormy night, the world seemed both eerily still and overwhelmingly chaotic. I, Liam Carter, wandered through the remnants of my shattered life with a numb determination. The physical retribution I had exacted, my final, brutal act of vengeance, had left Amanda and Travis broken, and in many ways it had left me changed as well. But now, as reality set in, I was forced to face the consequences of my actions and the heavy toll that violence had exacted on all our souls. The warehouse, now a grim monument to that terrible confrontation, faded into the background of my memories. I spent long hours driving aimlessly through rain-slicked streets, seeking solace in the anonymity of the night. My thoughts were an endless swirl of anger, regret, and a desperate need for closure. Every night, as I sat in the quiet solitude of my modest apartment, I replayed the events in my mind. The sound of the rain, Amanda's anguished cry, and the echo of my own fists meeting flesh. Though the physical scars on Amanda's body would eventually fade, I knew that the invisible wounds, the ones that would forever mar our hearts, would remain. The days that followed were marked by a tense silence at home. Amanda avoided me, her once familiar eyes now haunted by sorrow and guilt. Our conversations had become sparse, filled with clipped words and long pauses that spoke of an unspeakable loss. I tried to reach out, to bridge the chasm that had formed between us, but every attempt was met with a cold distance. It was as if the violent night had sealed our fates, leaving us both to endure the bitter consequences of our choices. My inner turmoil did not remain confined to our home. Friends and acquaintances sensed the shift in me. Hunter Reeves, Maverick Cole, and even the ever-optimistic writer James reached out with concern. They urged me to seek help, to find a way to mend my fractured spirit before it consumed me entirely. Liam, revenge may give you a momentary sense of control, Hunter said one evening, his voice heavy with empathy. But it's a poison that can destroy you from the inside out. Their words resonated with me, Even as I grappled with the satisfaction of having finally forced Amanda to face the consequences of her betrayal, I began attending therapy sessions with Donovan Price, the compassionate counselor who had helped me navigate the darker corridors of my mind. In our sessions, I revisited the night of the confrontation over and over, a relentless loop of anger, pain, and a desperate need for retribution. Donovan never judged me, but he reminded me that every act of violence left its own mark, not just on the victim, but on the perpetrator as well. Healing begins when you can let go of the need to hurt someone else, he told me during one session. True strength is in rebuilding your life, not in perpetuating the cycle of pain. Slowly, I began to understand that while my physical act of vengeance had given me a fleeting sense of power, it could never restore what had been lost. The retribution was irrevocable, an act that could not be undone by time or remorse. I started to see that Amanda's betrayal was not solely a reflection of her own failures, but also a mirror of my own shortcomings, a failure to nurture the love we once had. The realization was bitter and humbling, and it forced me to confront my own role in the slow disintegration of our marriage. In the midst of this internal reckoning, I received a call from the local authorities. The brutal events at the warehouse had not gone unnoticed, and whispers of the incident had begun to circulate. I was faced with the stark reality that my actions might lead to legal consequences, a prospect that both terrified and, in a strange way, relieved me. The possibility of facing judgment, of having my pain measured and weighed by the scales of justice, felt like the final, necessary reckoning. I wasn't looking for forgiveness from the law, but perhaps some form of absolution. A chance to acknowledge that what I had done, however driven by heartbreak, was irrevocable. Amanda, too, was forced to confront the aftermath. In the days following our confrontation, she began to withdraw not only from our shared home but from every part of the life we had built together. Her once bright spirit was dimmed by the weight of her guilt, and I could see in her eyes that she too was paying a heavy price. Our paths diverged as she sought to escape the memories that haunted her, leaving me alone with the consequences of a love that had been irreparably broken as the legal process unfolded slowly in the background. Police investigations, court summons, and the grim reality of what could come next. I found myself at a crossroads. The physical retribution I had sought was a temporary salve, a momentary burst of cathartic release that, in hindsight, had only deepened the wounds. I began to understand that true healing required more than just an act of violence. It demanded introspection, accountability, and the willingness to rebuild one's life from the ruins of pain. In the quiet hours of early morning, I would sit by the window and watch the sunrise, each new day a small promise of renewal. I started to rebuild my life in small, deliberate ways, returning to the gym, engaging in long, solitary walks, and even writing down my thoughts in a journal, a painstaking record of my journey from despair to the faint glimmer of hope. I began to see that every scar, every bruise, was a testament to a battle fought and a lesson learned. The physical retribution, once a symbol of my rage, slowly transformed in my mind into a reminder of the price I had paid for trying to reclaim control over my shattered life. One evening, as I sat in a quiet cafe reflecting on the past few months, I crossed paths with Sierra Vaughn, a vibrant, independent artist whose passion for life was both infectious and healing. Over cups of strong coffee and quiet conversation, she shared her own story of loss and rebirth, a narrative that resonated deeply with me. Sierra's resilience and determination to rebuild her life despite unimaginable odds inspired me. In her eyes, I saw the possibility of redemption, a future where pain did not dictate one's destiny. Through Sierra's friendship and the steady support of those who cared about me, I began to open up, not just to the possibility of forgiveness, but to the chance of forging a new identity. I realized that the path to true healing lay not in the endless cycle of revenge and bitterness, but in embracing the lessons of the past and allowing them to guide me toward a more meaningful future. As the legal proceedings drew closer and the specter of potential punishment loomed over me, I resolved to face whatever came next with honesty and humility. I knew that my actions had forever altered the course of my life, and I would have to live with the consequences of that dark night for the rest of my days. Yet, I also recognized that this was a necessary part of the reckoning, a final chapter in a story that had been marked by betrayal, violence, and ultimately, a desire for justice that I end time. The storm of my emotions began to subside, replaced by a sober acceptance of the past and a cautious hope for the future. I continued my therapy sessions, worked to repair fractured relationships, and slowly, painstakingly, began to piece together the fragments of my identity. The journey was far from linear. There were setbacks, moments of intense loneliness, and days when the memories of that fateful night threatened to overwhelm me. But with each new sunrise, I reminded myself that healing was a process, one that demanded both time and the courage to face one's deepest fears. Now, as I write these words, I am at a crossroads between a life forever marked by vengeance and a future that holds the promise of redemption. I have learned that physical retribution, while a potent expression of raw emotion, can never truly erase the pain of betrayal. Instead, it is the long, arduous journey toward forgiveness, both of others and of oneself, that ultimately leads to healing. I know that the scars will remain, both visible and hidden, but they will serve as reminders of the lessons learned in the crucible of betrayal and retribution. This is my story, a tale of love, infidelity, and the devastating consequences of betrayal. It is a story of a man who, driven to the brink by heartbreak, chose a path of physical retribution in a desperate bid for justice. And yet, in the aftermath of that terrible night, I discovered that true power lies not in the act of violence itself, but in the strength to rise above it, to rebuild a life from the ruins, and to find hope amid the darkness that I stand now, scarred but not broken, determined to face whatever comes next with the knowledge that every action has its price, and that the true measure of a man is not how he exacts revenge, but how he transforms pain into the promise of a new beginning. In the aftermath of that fateful night, I found myself standing at the crossroads of irrevocable loss and the possibility of renewal. The physical reckoning had been brutal, a desperate, raw outburst fueled by betrayal that left both Amanda and Travis battered, and our shared past in tatters. As the storm of violence subsided, I was left with scars that would forever mark the pages of my history, but also with an unyielding determination to rebuild. Sitting alone in the quiet hours of an early morning, I realized that retribution, however cathartic in the moment, was only the beginning of a much longer journey. The searing pain of betrayal still throbbed beneath my skin, yet in that ache lay the seeds of transformation. I understood that true healing was not found in endless cycles of revenge, but in the courage to face one's own darkness and slowly, painstakingly, forge a new path forward. That I turned inward, seeking solace in the steady rhythm of everyday life. A brisk walk in the rain, a solitary run at dawn, moments spent writing down my raw emotions. With the support of friends like Hunter, Maverick, and the unexpected warmth of Sierra, I began to piece together the fragments of who I once was, reimagining my future beyond the pain. Now, as I stand on the threshold of a new beginning, I know that the scars of betrayal will always be a part of me. Yet they serve as a reminder that I survived, that I was strong enough to face the consequences of love turned to ashes and to transform that anguish into a quiet resolve. Each sunrise now offers a promise, that even in the wake of devastating loss, hope can emerge, and from the ruins, a better, truer version of myself can be built. This final act of retribution is not an end, but the catalyst for my rebirth. A final farewell to a past defined by betrayal and a hopeful welcome to the possibility of redemption and a new dawn. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.